next few weeks or months. While this is new to many districts, we do have few school districts who have experience with student board members, and we're actually going to ask those superintendents to talk a little bit about what their experience has been in seeing student board members contribute to the leadership model in a school district. The Suffolk County School Superintendents Association and Nassau Council of School Superintendents are very excited about this new initiative, which isn't just an initiative, it's a state law. And, so you can hear more about what your expectations are. That's why we put together this webinar with our partner at the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association, who's very active in advocacy for all stakeholders, including students and community members, in being able to contribute to the leadership and decisions at the school district level. So I'd like to introduce two members of the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association. We have with us the Superintendent of Bayport Blue Point School District, Dr. Tim Harney, and we have with us the Superintendent of Harborfield School District, Dr. Rory Manning. So Dr. Harney, can I pass it over to you and you talk a little bit about your experience of working with a student board member?
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Dean. I appreciate it. So we've had a board member, a student board member, I would say, for at least 17 years now. We had one as I was the high school principal here, assistant super, now superintendent for a number of years. And we've had one since I was a high school principal. And I will say over the years, the position has evolved. It has evolved in terms of their role, and they're actually tied to the student voice. So mainly right now, and it probably changes a little bit from year to year, depending on the student board member as well, and the role that they would like to take on. But in general, where we've been over the last number of years, we've had a student who's been part of, as I said, who's been part of the board. They have been giving a student report. So they are on our Board of Education agenda for every single meeting, and they give a student report. And the report can be a number of items. It could be things that are going on in districts. It could be celebrations that are going on. It could be events. So they do reach out to our principals on a regular basis to gather information from them, because they don't just share information from the high school, where typically obviously your student members coming from. They do share information from all the schools and things that are going on from each of the schools. So they give a student report. Usually their report follows my report, meaning the superintendent's report. So we hand it off to them. And then as things come up over the course of the year, we may use that student member to gather other information from other students within the schools, and then they come back and report on that. So that is mainly how we have been using it over the last number of years. Again, sometimes it changes a little bit based on the student and their comfort level, but we do try to get them involved. They come to every single one of our meetings. For us, they stay the entire meeting, and I'm talking about the open meeting. Obviously, they're not part of an exec session or anything along those lines, but really from the beginning of the meeting to the end of the meeting, they have been part of they've been a member of, and sit right at the dais with the regular other board members and myself and some of my cabinet. So that's kind of what we do here in Bayport Blue Point.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Harney, for that perspective. And we'll go to Dr. Manning to give us a perspective from Harborfields.
Good morning, Dr. Dean. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm not going to repeat a lot of what Tim had shared because it's the same here. I've been in the district 13 years, and in those 13 years, we've had student board members every year. I can't say exactly when it started, but I know it's a long-standing practice here. The student board member is typically the student senior class president. We've always allowed the high school principal to select the person and provide that recommendation to district office. In my days as high school principal, that's what I did. But again, typically it's always been the senior class president. I can't remember an exception to that. So when we go through that process and we select the student, we go through a little bit of an orientation, nothing too crazy. But like Tim said, the typical duty in preparation for that student is the development of their report. And as Tim said, depending on the student, sometimes those reports are more comprehensive than in other years. We have always been of the mindset that we understand how busy our students are, and we've always offered them the opportunity to stay for the entire meeting. However, if they needed to go for any reason, we would just ask them to share their report at the beginning of the meeting. As Tim said, our student report is always on the agenda as a standing item for the public meetings. So in my 13 years, I will say that we've had one student who's stayed for the entire meeting every time. Other students have taken the liberty of the option to excuse themselves after their student report. Again, we understand how busy our seniors are, so nobody really objected to that. So again, I don't expect that practice to change. We wouldn't require students to stay for the entire time, although of course they're able to, and we always make that clear to them. So the main part for us is to ensure it's an enjoyable experience for our student board members. So we make sure they're comfortable in the preparation. So we go through that orientation process, and then the high school principal always meets with the student a week prior to the upcoming board meeting, so they have a chance to review. If there's anything going on the student might not be aware of, if any highlights the high school principal wants to touch upon, we make sure that the student feels comfortable with their upcoming report. And that's been it. It's been a very positive experience for us. That student does serve as a liaison for me in my 5 years here now as superintendent. And again, it's been an enjoyable experience. So, and we always work to recognize them at the end of the year. We do a little recognition in our board recognition program to recognize their service and their time. And again, it's been a good experience for us.
Thank you, Dr. Manning. We appreciate that. So to our future student board members, you can see just from these few examples, your role is very meaningful to the process. It may look a little bit different based on the district you're in and your wishes of the board, but your voice is absolutely meaningful. And to talk to you a little bit more about what your roles and responsibilities will be as the Ex-Officio Student Board of Education member, I'll hand it back to Mr. Vecchio. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, I want to thank Dr. Manning and Dr. Harney and Dr. Dean for their participation this morning, as well as on this webinar. I know we have a slew of superintendents that have joined this webinar, and this webinar is being recorded. So those who may not have been able to make it will be able to view this on demand at a later date. I want to thank you all for tuning in this morning. My name is Bob Vecchio. I'm the Executive Director for the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association, and we help support boards of education through advocacy at the federal and state level. We also offer workshops and trainings about best practices for governance. And today we're talking about governance, the change in New York State of mandating ex-officio student school board members to the table was done with the idea that student voice is an important voice to have in the conversation when the governance teams of the district, and that is your boards of education, together with the superintendent of schools and their cabinet and senior leadership team, are discussing policy issues, making decisions about resource allocation for programs or other items to improve student outcome and student achievement within the district. So the New York State Education Department wanted to bring that student voice to the table for some of those conversations, as well as reporting, like we heard from Dr. Manning and Dr. Harney, about things that are going on in the district that is important to bring to the table to the Board of Education. I was on a webinar not too long ago, and I heard it described like this. If you have a Board of Education of 7 members, it's not 7 plus 1, but now your board consists of 8 members, because you're more than just a liaison now. You're an ex-officio member, which means you have the right to sit at that table and participate in the debate and the discussions that come up during a public meeting. The only difference is you won't be able to vote. And we'll get into all that, but today's agenda is to review best practices for a student school board member, and a lot of the best practices that we impart upon school board members apply here, because you are sitting at the table. Haven't had enough coffee yet this morning, but you're sitting at the table with the Board of Education before the public. And the public votes in those trustees. And these trustees are going to appoint you as an ex officio member of the Board of Education. So it's a significant, serious role that should be taken seriously. We'll go over the characteristics of a good governance teams and other things that you should know. And then we'll open it up to Q&A that could be put into the chat dialog box. We'll pay attention to that and we'll get to some questions. But the thing I will stress to all the students who are about to take on this role, number one, have a long conversation with your superintendent of schools about this new role, and also members of your Board of Education, particularly the officers of the board, the president, the vice president. Some boards have multiple vice presidents. Speak to those officers, speak to those board members about this new role. It's new for everybody in New York State. Not every school district is new to this. Some school districts have had student members at the table as liaisons, but this role is just a little bit different, that it's actually an ex officio member, not just a liaison. So with that being said, you may be required, you'll be appointed by the Board of Education, and the Board of Education will most likely appoint you through formal resolution. This is just a sample resolution that we're sending out that we saw online, because student school board members are not unique. It's unique and new to New York, but it's happened across the country for a number of years now. So this is the sample resolution that we took from a school district outside of New York State. But again, since this is a state mandated policy requirement, the board should take a resolution to officially appoint that student school board member to the board. And again, this is a sample resolution that could be reviewed by your superintendent and the board's legal counsel. After you are appointed to the board, normally at the reorganizational meeting in July, newly elected board members and superintendent of schools take an oath of office for that coming year. You may be doing the same. And again, we would recommend that you take an oath of office. And this is, again, just a sample oath of office that could be modified. But basically, you're going to swear that you're going to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New York, as an ex officio school board member, and you're going to carry out those duties to the best of your ability. Again, this is a law. This is a regulation, so it should be taken seriously, and you should be taking an oath just like newly elected or re-elected school board members take their oath at the beginning of their new term. There are some resources available from the New York State School Board Association that we highly recommend districts and student school board members to take a look at. There's a QR code that will link you to these resources. And I also put in the website link in case the QR code is not working for you. But again, the New York State School Board Association has hosted a couple of webinars for school board members and for administrators about this new change, and they will also be supporting student school board members with information for you. And there's also an event that they're having in Albany in August. It's called the Leadership in Education event, and there'll be some trainings and workshops surrounding student school board members. So what we'll do now is just get into some overviews as to roles and responsibilities of boards members. But what you should know is that, all right, so from an historical perspective, and everybody should be able to see the slideshow now. Okay, from an historical perspective, boards of education were created back in the 1800s. Horace Mann, who is pretty much the father of public education, created the current system as we have it back in 1837 through 1849, the structure of public education. And simply stated, school boards were created so that they represented the local school communities and brought their value set, and they were the ones responsible for the public education of the students in their local community. So it's been around for a while. The primary purpose of the Board of Education is that, you know, everybody is focused on one thing: providing the best educational opportunities for the students in the communities that they serve. And they do that with the singular focus on what's best for kids. So the board's purpose is to make sure that they provide the resources, the programs, the staff, and everything else that is necessary to make sure that they're providing the best program and academic opportunities for the students in their community to succeed. Board members should follow a code of ethics. A good board member will never take an action which will compromise the Board of Education. So an example of that would be a board makes a decision by a majority vote and maybe a board member was in the dissenting vote, that board member should not go out and sabotage the success of that decision. That would be unethical. They're supposed to support the decision of the majority of the board, even if it was something that they voted against. But once it's voted by the board, they need to support it. Don't let outside special interest groups have undue or unnecessary influence. It's important to hear from outside special interest groups, but you don't want those groups having the undue influence or some sort of hidden agenda from a particular board member. That is not best practices. And again, publicly support the actions of the board as a whole, because no individual board member has any power or authority. It's only the collective power of the board that makes policy decisions and enforces changes within the district that the superintendents and their teams are required to carry out. Dr. Harney touched on executive session. We'll get into that a little bit later, but that is something that you don't need to be concerned with, because as ex-officio members, you can't attend executive sessions, but those private confidential conversations are private and confidential for a reason. Never undermine the authority of the superintendent of schools or the administrative staff. There's a chain of command that needs to be followed in the school districts, and you as ex-officio members don't have any authority or power as an individual over the superintendent of schools. You can't get your principal fired or anything like that. That would be undermining the authority of the chain of command set by the Board of Education and the superintendent and his administrative team. And again, the board has the authority. No individual member has the authority. And we always stress to board members, never be a micromanager. We are policymakers. We are fiduciaries. We are not responsible for buses being late or telling on folks if a bus is late. We act as a customer service liaison between the community and the administrative team of the district, but we do not micromanage. We hire the superintendent of schools and his or her entire staff to do the micromanaging based on policies that school board members set. Major responsibilities, again, developing a district's annual plan, overseeing budget development and the budget, making sure that schools are following state and federal legislation, regulations, and laws, and working closely with the superintendent of schools and the administrative team to make sure all those things are being carried out. The school boards are the ones that actually levy taxes to support all the programs in the school district. So they will take a formal motion to set the tax rate after budget votes have been completed. And we just completed those budget votes. So based on those spending plans, sometime in October, most school districts will set their tax rate, or before October. And that's what shows up on folks' property taxes minus the state aid that they get. And again, the only person that is micromanaged by a board of education in the school district is the superintendent of schools. And boards of education will do an annual evaluation and also set goal setting for that superintendent to base that evaluation on every year. That is the only person in the school district that the Board of Education micromanages, because the superintendent of schools reports directly to the Board of Education. As an ex-officio member, you will participate in the public presentation of any evaluations of the superintendent of schools or any conversations about that, but the Board of Education usually develops the evaluation tool and supervises and evaluates that superintendent. Again, the big thing that school boards do is set goals and planning so that the superintendent and their team can work together with their boards of education in developing those goals and the planning to carry out those goals during a singular year, multiple years, and long-range planning and development. So that is the board's role, is to set the goals as to what schools want. When I was a school board member for 18 years, one of our goals was to increase our graduation rate. The goal is kind of in general in form, and it's up to the superintendent of schools to develop the action plan to achieve those goals over multiple years, single year. But the board, together with the governance team, that is the superintendent and the senior administrative team in the district, set those goals as to what they want to do for their district. Maybe it's capital projects to improve facilities. Maybe it's adding programs, advanced placement courses, whatever it may be. The boards, together with the superintendent and the administrative teams, set those goals. So you may be part of those conversations about goal planning and bring the student voice to the table as far as the direction the district will be heading in the future. The school board meeting itself is a very formal meeting. It's a business meeting of the school district, and actions have to be taken by the board so that things like payroll can be completed. Hiring of new staff is done at a school board meeting. Implementation or approval of a new policy and regulations take place. So it's a very formal setting. And the board president is usually the chairperson of that meeting, meaning they are the ones who run that meeting, and they will work together with the superintendent to set the agenda for a particular meeting. Most school boards will meet at least monthly. Some will meet multiple times during the course of the month. As ex officio members, you are entitled to attend every public meeting of the Board of Education. So if a board has a business meeting and the public portion, it's expected that our ex officio student school board members are at the table. If there's a budget workshop, again, any meeting that is held in public with the Board of Education, the ex officio members are expected to attend those meetings and also actively participate in those meetings. Board members have to efficiently go through the business agenda. Lots of times, some school board meetings can usually, if they're done right, are usually done pretty quickly and efficiently. But sometimes meetings could drag on. And again, that'll be the decision of your individual district as to the length of your participation at the meetings. But again, you have the right to be at the beginning of the public portion of the meeting and at the end of the public portion meeting. And board members don't abuse the privilege of holding matters over and trying to delay actions. You know, they're expected to carry out the business of the district in an efficient, expedient manner so that the district can run efficiently during the course of the year. But it's at these meetings that policy discussions will take place. It's at these meetings that most school boards, the vast majority, also allow for public comment on any issues within the district. And it's during those public comment periods that, you know, sometimes they go very well, sometimes they can get a little spirited, but it's up to the board president to run and control those meetings. So make sure you take your cues from your board president as to the expectations as to your participation during the public portion of the meeting. We would caution you not to engage in conversation during public comment period. Allow your superintendent and your board president to control and handle those conversations back and forth because they could get very tricky very quickly. One of the most important things that boards of education have to do is have a strong working relationship with their superintendent of schools. Highly effective schools have great relationships with the senior team and the board. And it's extremely important that there's open communication, there's trust and verification back and forth to further enhance that trust. But the board superintendent role is one of the most important roles in the district, because they are the ones that are setting the district direction, the goals, and the allocation of resources. So there has to be a very strong relationship with board members and the superintendent of schools. And you are now an ex officio board member. So you have to have a very good working relationship with your superintendent of schools, which is why we strongly advise part of your onboarding process as ex officio board members is to have a conversation with your superintendent of schools so that you understand what their expectation of your role and your participation is, and you ask any questions that you may have that they can address. And I would also encourage and highly encourage having that meeting together with the board president or the officers of the board, and also try to find a board member as a mentor. You have a lot of board members that have served a long, long time. I had a board member who served nearly 40 years, and her knowledge and her history was so critically important in some of our decision-making processes. So again, make sure you participate. Other things that you guys should know, as an ex officio member, what does that mean? Well, that means that you don't have any voting privileges. You can't vote on a resolution of the board. You can participate in the discussion. You can offer student voice to the table. You could bring reports to the board, and you could participate in the public discussion. But when it comes to voting on the resolutions or the actions during the business meeting, the board is the ones that vote on that. But you are entitled to participate in those conversations and debates prior to action being taken. An example of a meeting that's not open to the public, it was alluded to earlier. It's a meeting that is called the executive session. And during an executive session meeting, that's where they discuss personnel matters. They may discuss student discipline matters. They're confidential for a very specific reason. As an ex officio member, you're not entitled to attend those executive sessions for a variety of legal reasons that protect you and the district. So don't think you're being left out for any particular reason other than just because of the legalities of what goes on in the executive session and some of the things that they discuss in those meetings. It's more to protect you as well as the district from any potential exposure to liability. But again, you engage in all public board discussions. A couple other things that you should know. There are 8 characteristics that make up an effective governance team. And an effective governance team, it's highly documented. If you have a highly effective governance team, meaning your Board of Education, Superintendent of Schools, and senior leadership, you have a highly functioning district. And on Long Island, we're fortunate that we have some of the best school districts in the country right here. And when we look at high effective governance teams, they share certain characteristics. First, they have a vision as to where they want to go. Again, getting back to goal setting. Everything is about goals, short-term and long-term. And those goals usually reflect the values of a school community. Sometimes a school district will want to institute certain security protocols because that's the value set of a school district, and another school district may be doing it differently. This is what we call local control and local governance, and it's so important because that value set that comes from the community to the board table to the vision of the district is so critically important to make sure that everybody is on board and invested in the direction that the district is moving in. Boards set policies, meaning we will set the policy for the district to make sure that the policy then lines up with the actions that the superintendent will lay out in regulation and other practices to meet the policies that go back to the goals of the district. We talked about strong relationships. Strong relationships among board members is critically important. That means open communication, no hidden agendas, no surprises. Strong relationships are also critically important with the superintendent and their senior leadership team. Strong relationships are important with the community stakeholders, the parents, the taxpayers, our elected officials. You have to have very strong relationships with our elected officials as well. School boards make decisions based on data. Everything should be data driven, not the anecdote story of, well, this happened once or twice. School boards respond to patterns, not incidents, and their decisions to set policies or allocation of resources should be data driven. So this way it's based in fact. And again, allocation of the resources for the goals. That's one of the most important things that happened during budget development with the recommendation of the superintendent of schools is how to allocate the resources by either adding classes, adding programs, making investments in our buildings and grounds to further enhance academic opportunities. And a board acts in a united fashion together with their governance team. Again, once a decision is made, the entire board is to support it, even if you had a member or two of the board who did not vote for that particular item. But once it's voted on by the majority, it's a united front to carry it out effectively and efficiently. Team development. We stress all the time, we're in the education business, so we have to be life learners ourselves as board members, and that includes you. Attend workshops, learn what your role is. So this way, all these things work together because when they're working together, it improves student success, and that's a documented fact. Highly effective governance teams share these characteristics to improve student success. Student success could be measured by a number of things, but highly functioning school governance teams produce highly functioning districts, which benefit students and community. So keep that in mind, that all these things are interlocked with one another, and the success of a school district needs each piece of that. And you are going to be playing a piece of that by bringing the student voice to the table. Other things to keep in mind, be prepared. If you're asked to present the report, make sure you have done your homework and are ready to prepare and present your report concisely and efficiently, knowing that time during a public board meeting is, something of a value set for a lot of people. So be prepared to carry out the role. Ask questions. New board members, as a veteran board member, I would always try to answer every and any question that any of my board members would have. Ask questions of your board president, the vice president, the superintendent of schools. We want you to be successful. If you're successful, our district's going to be successful. Be on time. If your portion of the public meeting starts at 7 o'clock, get there at 6:45, because my mother always taught me that if I was Not 15 minutes early. I was usually late. So be on time and be respectful. Be respectful of people who are attending, the public. Even if somebody comes into the meeting that you particularly don't care for, you kill them with kindness, okay? Because you are sitting in a role that is very different than just being a student. So be respectful of everybody that is attending the meeting, your fellow board members, the superintendent, and the other staff that participate in that meeting. Listen a lot, right? The expression, you have two ears, one mouth, listen twice as much compared to what you say. Listen very carefully. Some could take notes, but listen to what your board members are talking about around the table. Listen to what the public is saying if you stick around for the public portion. No surprises at the board table. Don't bring to the board table the evening of the meeting something you may have heard at the high school, some juicy, gossipy thing. If you hear something that is of concern, bring that to the superintendent of schools or bring it to the board president or both. No surprises at the board table. One thing that would really not sit well with me as a board president chairing the meeting is a surprise at the board table because it makes everybody look bad. Have conversations with your superintendent or your board president prior to a meeting if there is a concern that you're hearing or that you feel may warrant a conversation at the table. Talk to them first ahead of time. Be mindful of your body language too during a public meeting. Don't be lounging out, don't be zoning out, don't be rolling your eyes because the public is paying very close attention to what happens at board meetings. For many, the first time they come to a school board meeting, maybe their student is or their child's being recognized. It's a very big deal. It's a big thing. So be mindful of your body language, sit up straight, and make eye contact with people that are speaking. Again, getting back to listening skills. But body language is very, very important because as an ex-officio member, you are now part of that board, and part of the board sets the tone for the rest of the district. And this is something that we tell board members all the time. Be mindful of your body language because it could portray something or the public could perceive it in a negative way, and that's not something that you want taking place at a public board meeting. And lastly, remember, you don't have the authority to close school for snow days. That is something that I had to share with my own kids when I became board president. They thought I could close school on a snow day. That is the decision and the responsibility of the superintendent of schools. Boards of education do not make that decision, nor would I want to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning trying to make that decision as well. So those are just some overviews for you as student members of the Board of Education. Again, it's not 7+1 or 5+1. It is now 8 board members at the table, and 7 of them have voting rights, and 1 of them is an ex officio. So it's an important role. We want you to take it very seriously. We also want you to reach out and lean on your superintendents, your board officers, particularly your board presidents, with questions or concerns on how to fulfill this role the best way that you can. And we anticipate questions. We would hope that there would be questions because this is a very serious role. And this is something that, we want you to be successful because you'll be an ambassador of the district. You'll be going to, make very clear to your fellow students that you don't have the authority to change the menu in the cafeteria. Make very clear that you cannot, get vending machines in the hallway. The Board of Education is the governance team. You as an individual ex officio member are not expected to, nor can you make those decisions or make those promises. And, some folks may think you have a different role than what is allowed. And that even as a veteran board member, people would come up to me and say, well, I want so-and-so as a coach replaced because of whatever the reason. That is not what a board member does. A board member sticks with policy. A fiduciary, meaning we're in charge of overseeing the finances, concerns regarding who the staff is for a coaching role or a teaching role or administrative role in a building, that is left with the superintendent of schools. So at this time, we'll open up the chat to any questions that folks have. We wanted to make sure we brought you just a very general overview to give you an idea. Each school district hopefully will have somewhat of an onboarding process, meaning that they will go over with you how they do things. Each district does things a little bit differently. Okay. And that's okay. That's local control, local governance. And we would expect that. So learn how your district does things. And, hopefully you'll be successful. We're here as a resource. The Nassau-Suffolk School Board, nssba.org. You could always reach out to us, but we want you to be successful because you're playing a very important role bringing the student voice to the table to help our already high-functioning governance teams to bring it to another level. So we'll open it up to any questions, if anything that Dr. Harney or Dr. Manning want to add, or Dr. Dean. Now would be the time. I know it's early in the morning. Okay, question came in. What do students' reports usually entail? Are they more concerned or accomplishments or a mix of both? So again, Dr. Harney, Dr. Manning, I think you guys can answer this from your experience. What do the reports usually consist of? And again, with the ex-officio role, in addition to the reports that may be warranted at the table, there'll be some discussion about some policy issues or things that are on the agenda. So let Dr. Harney and Dr. Manning weigh in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Vecchio. From us, it's a mix. It's some of the things you'll see is celebrations of things that are going on, of certain accomplishments, from individual accomplishments to staff accomplishments to whole group or teams or clubs accomplishments. So you'll get all that. And then also you'll get things that are coming up, things to look for, things that are going on within the district. Those are the main things. And then once in a while, if there was something going on within one of the schools that was a topic of some sort, then that student board member, student representative might bring that forward, or they might ask us, hey, how's this going on within the building? And you might get a little information from that. But in general, it's about sharing good news and sharing upcoming events and celebrating things and things to look out for and things as we're going forward.
Hey, Dr. Manning, anything you want to
add? Much of the same thing. It's about celebrations. One of the challenges that we've had, we're relatively small. We have 4 buildings, so we try to encourage our student board members to reach out to the other buildings as part of their research. Sometimes it's more successful than others, but again, celebrations of good news and things that are coming up.
Okay. We also have a question. What are our thoughts on having a student at the agenda setting meeting or parts of that meeting? So I'll go back to agenda setting meetings are normally not public, but I would leave that individual decision to the individual district governance team. Dr. Manning, Dr. Harney, I'll let you guys weigh in on that. You know, some districts have agenda setting meetings. Some it's as informal as a conversation with the board president, reviewing the agenda very quickly, briefly over the phone. So it depends on what each individual district does. And again, I think that would be a decision that the local Board of Education, together with the superintendent, could make about agenda setting and students being part of that. I'll let you guys weigh in.
And the only thing I would add, Bob, as you know, we have a policy on agenda setting, which talks about the president's role in that. So,
yep.
I would say ours, as again, we're following policy as well. We have not had students as part of the agenda setting in the past. It's really been a conversation between myself and the Board of Ed president. Though there have been times if things have come up on the agenda that I thought were student related, I would go to that student and just say, listen, you may get a question on this of some sort, and we'd have a conversation ourselves. So that may happen, but nothing to the extent when we're setting the agenda.
Yep. And what I'll also say is if there's a item that the student board member feels is important that warrants a conversation at the meeting, I would say have that conversation with your superintendent. You know, say, hey, this is a concern. We're hearing students talk about this particular policy and we want to put it on, you know, I think it'd be important to have on the agenda. Again, that gets back to having that conversation with the superintendent of schools together with your board president so that there's no surprises at the table, because there may be something that's percolating at the high school that is important to the students that they feel should be discussed in the board meeting, but I would have that conversation with the superintendent of schools, because the superintendent could vet out what's important to discuss at the board table or what's important to discuss at a building level with building administration. Sometimes that conversation will be different depending on the issue. So again, it gets back to that communication piece with your superintendent and your board president, either one or both. So again, part of the onboarding process could clear up those expectations for the student board members by each individual district. And again, it gets back to how each individual district handles certain things. I know some folks joined late. This webinar is recorded, so it'll be available on demand. We'll send it out to the districts in the next couple of days. And this PowerPoint will be up on our website under the resources. We'll also send the PowerPoint out to the district clerks to share with anybody who has missed this. And I know another question, what time of the day do these meetings take place? So typically, board meetings take place in the evening because board members work full-time, most likely, in addition to serving their roles as board members. They are not employees of the district, right? So board members do not get paid. They don't work for the district. Normally, they may be retired, but most board members work outside of the school day and school hours. So typically your meetings will take place in the evening and usually the early evening. I know in my home district, I would go straight from work to our board meeting, and our public portion would start anywhere between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. and usually have it wrapped up fairly quickly. 9 o'clock, 9:30 is usually the latest. If we started at 8, if we started at 7, we tried to end it a little bit early. But again, the other reason it's in the evening is the public who has a right to attend these public meetings. You want to make it convenient for the public to be able to attend. The other thing that came up, and this is a great thing, and I'm going to add it to the PowerPoint, dress code. So dress to impress, right? You will see the superintendent of schools be in formal business attire. Most school board members may have suit and tie, or at least a sports coat, or some sort of good-looking clothing, because again, it's a very formal meeting of that district. You're ambassadors of the district, so dress to impress. Don't show up in sweats. Don't show up in shorts. I used to have this conversation with my individual board members too, because sometimes they would want to show up in a polo shirt and jeans or whatever. But you have to remind folks, sometimes if you're celebrating student accomplishments and their parents are coming and photos are being taken, this is a big deal and should be treated as such. So dress to impress. Where will these board meetings be held? Will it be virtual or in person? The student would like to know the dress code policy, which we covered. Board meetings are held in person in a public setting. Some are recorded and live streamed. Board members, it gets a little tricky, but board members are expected to attend in person at the public location so that the public could see them participating and ask questions and conversations. That would be true for the student ex-officio members. It takes place in a public setting, usually in a school building or administrative building. The boards have designated areas where they hold board meetings. Some boards will rotate among buildings in the district. Again, these are questions you can ask the superintendent and your board president as part of your onboarding process, but they're in person. You're expected to attend in person. Even if they're streamed live on the web. If there is a virtual meeting called, the board and the superintendent will certainly let you know about your participation during a virtual meeting. We had a lot of virtual meetings during COVID, but we're back to in-person now. Said you mentioned having a good relationship with the superintendent. In specific, should there be from our BOCES or the high school we attend? So again, there's a BOCES district superintendent for Western Suffolk BOCES, Nassau BOCES, and Eastern Suffolk BOCES. You should get to know them, and the board president for the various BOCES as well. Get to know who they are and have that good working relationship with them. And of course, with the BOCES too, you're going to work very closely with your building principals because you guys are coming from different areas throughout the BOCES. So again, get to know who the district superintendent is. There's a district superintendent for each of the BOCES. Some BOCES also have chief operating officers. You're going to want to get to know them. Again, it's part of your onboarding process with the BOCES. I'm sure they'll cover that. What common challenges, if any, do you see ex-officio members facing when trying to make an impact, and how do you think they can overcome them? So I'm going to speak for myself, and then I'll let the superintendents weigh in. One of the concerns that we have had as a school board association, and I know as a former school board member, is sometimes what happens during a public meeting. And sometimes public meetings can get spirited. meaning there are passions that the public are going to bring to the board. Maybe they're disagreeing with a policy decision. Maybe there's something going on in the district that people are very upset about. One of the concerns that we have with student board members participating in the public conversations and in the public meetings is you may witness and see some of that. And again, it gets back to how you conduct yourself. During the public portion of the board meeting, allow the board president and the superintendent to handle those conversations going back and forth. It may be very easy to want to jump in and offer your opinion. Listen a lot, say very little, let the superintendent and the board president handle the public portion of the meeting. You don't want to create a viral moment for yourself or for your district. That's the best piece of advice I can give you, and that's the same piece of advice I give to board members. The other common challenge I think ex-officio members are going to face is there's going to be expectations as to what people think you can and can't do. Very seriously, they're going to think that you can change something that's done at the high school because now you sit as a student representative at the board. I caution you to not overpromise anything or promise anything at all. Just say, if it's a concern, we'll bring it to the attention of the board and the superintendent and let it be handled that way, because it's the administrative team that handles the day-to-day operations, which is 90% of the concerns that may be brought to you because they think you have some sort of authority. You're an ex-officio member that's bringing your voice to the table, an important voice, but it's the board collectively, not even the board president can decide on any one thing, but it's the board collectively that makes the decisions regarding policy, the hiring of a superintendent of schools, and the fiduciary decisions that are made for resource allocations, not an individual board member, the collective governance of the board as a whole. So those, I think, are some of the common challenges. And again, have a lot of conversations if certain concerns are being brought your way or you're feeling uncomfortable. Dr. Manning, Dr. Harney, I'll let you weigh in on that question as well, because I think that's a really important one.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Vecchio, I think you hit a lot of it. I think the other thing that I would suggest as you're doing this is one, and you've kind of alluded to this a number of times, is one is if there's something that wants to come forward, please go at it. Please make sure you do have that conversation with the superintendent, so that way he or she can help you with that conversation and bringing it forward and getting it on the board agenda. And you can have a real conversation about it. Two, and again, Mr. Vecchio alluded to it a little bit, was bringing information forward. A lot of times you'll see people use terms like, oh yeah, a lot of students. Meanwhile, it might have been only one or two. It might have been one or two of your friends. Remember, you are a student voice, so you are representing. So for example, if you're asked to go gather information, you need to go out and actually gather information from, all your constituents, because you are representing them all. So that is a big thing that I often people will run into, or they'll want to bring something forward. And if it, for example, even if it came to me as superintendent, I will start to ask questions. All right, where did this come from? How many people? And then you start to dig into it a little bit. So I think the more information you have coming forward, and again, more of a representation of your entire student body, as opposed to, your one or two people that you're closest with who say, hey, you need to get this done for me, or whatever it may be. I think that's something just to kind of pay attention to. And then there was a question up here that, Bob, I don't know if you attached to, but it goes along with this. The last thing is try to make sure, and Dr. Manning spoke about this, is where you are representing all the buildings. I will tell you, my student reps have done a very good job. I don't get involved in it at all. They have emails with my principals. They're gathering that information. So not just truly representing the high school, they are truly representing my pre-K through my 12. So it takes a little bit of work on them, but they've kind of built themselves a routine, and they give a report. And the question was here is how long are the reports? Usually it's between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on what is going on at the time of the district. But again, trying to make sure you're including everyone, I think, is one of the most important things as you look to bring information forward or celebrate and share information.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is that for the student board members on the call here, that being a board member is not easy. Not only do you not get paid, there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. So for example, I have a board meeting coming up next Wednesday, and this is the agenda, the backup to the agenda. So it's like,
and that's a light agenda.
Yeah, so over 500 pages of backup. A lot of it's public, but some of it is not. So you wouldn't have access to that. But our board members do a good job of being prepared, so that when the meeting comes, of course, if there's any questions that they want to pose, we're ready to have those discussions in public. Because as Bob said earlier, we try not to blindside people with questions, but that does take a lot of prep work.
The
So
last thing I'm
that's
going
the
to
only thing I would
add,
add to that.
yeah, the last thing I would add that I just thought of too is after a public board meeting, you may be approached by the media. And here's what I would say about that. Again, allow your superintendent and your board president to handle any media inquiries. They may come up innocently and say, hey, Jaden, the board just discussed this and you offered this opinion. What do you think about the board not supporting your position? It may be an innocent conversation that they'll come up to you. School districts and boards have very specific procedures on how to handle any interaction and inquiries from the media. Follow them to a T. They're in place for a reason. When you're dealing with the media, know that they have a very different agenda than what the school district and the school board may have. So if somebody from the media innocently approaches you, it could be local media, a local weekly paper, it could be Newsday, it could be News 12, it depends on the situation, because they want that soundbite, they want that headline, they want people to click on the story. Just say, please talk to the superintendent of the schools. That would be my advice. And then the superintendent will know how to handle any inquiry or any interaction with the media. Some school districts have public relation firms. Some districts have their own people in-house. Some districts, depending on the talent of the superintendent or the board president, on how media savvy they are, may kick it to one or the other. That's what we used to do in my home district. Again, you should not be interacting with the media, because again, it could go sideways in a heartbeat. And we don't want to ever put our student board of ed ex-officio members in that position, because it could get very tricky very quickly. And the school district could be spending a lot of time afterwards. So I caution all of you not to interact with media and just defer back to the superintendent of schools if somebody approaches you. Well, students have access to the agenda a few days before the meeting. So I'm going to let the superintendent of schools, but my expectation as a board president would be all non-confidential information should be shared at the same time that the other board is getting it. Dr. Manning, Dr. Harney?
Yes, they would have access to our public agenda is typically posted Friday before a Wednesday meeting.
Yeah, same thing. Ours goes public and they would have access at that same exact time.
Yep. And the other thing here, will students receive a list of all board meetings in advance? Yes. Every school board is required to have what they call a reorganizational meeting in the very beginning of July. And usually at that meeting, they will adopt the board meeting dates. Usually board meeting dates are pretty much set in stone. Some will do like the third Thursday of every month, blah, blah, blah. But the meeting dates are usually set well in advance, because school calendars are a very complicated thing. I know as a board member, that was my first learning about how complicated a calendar could be. So you should have all the meetings in advance. If special meetings are called or additional meetings are added, you'll have advance notice of those meetings if they're public meetings. The other comment we have here, when in a meeting, I understand we don't get to vote on things, but will our voice or opinion be heard the same way a non-ex-official would? I would say definitely, and it carries a little more, in my opinion, carries a little more weight, because this is a law that the ex-officio student board members are required to be at the table. So your voice will certainly be heard, and the state of New York has put a different level of importance on it by making sure that your voice is at the table to be heard. Again, your voice may be heard but not agreed upon, but once the board decides as a decision as the board, would be your role as a student ex-officio member to support the decision of the board as a whole and not to be critical of that. But there's usually reasons why a board will decide on a certain way. But yes, your voice is a critical voice at the table, so much so that the state of New York decided it was important to mandate that voice to be at the table to help districts continue to engage the student population. And this is a great civics lesson too. I got to tell you, nothing like local grassroots democracy. You guys have a unique opportunity to really learn how local government works, and you'll get to know how the state government interacts with school districts. The federal government gets to interact with school district. It's going to be as meaningful as much as you want it to be. So learn a lot. It's a great, great lesson in what I believe is the best local democracy out there. It's as close to the individual stakeholders as it can be. It's closer than a village or a town government. And listen, for those that maybe have political aspirations, this is a great learning ground on how governance works and how locally elected officials, which are school board trustees, operate both for the benefit of the district and interacting with the other levels of government. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I think you're good.
Okay. We are now fast approaching the hour, and I'm a big believer in getting things done 90 minutes or less. So, any other questions? Once again, we'll be sharing this video with the school districts to share out for those who may not have attended. The PowerPoint will also be available. And again, have those conversations with your superintendents and your board officers. We're really excited to have you guys have a seat at the table. It's all new for us, so there may be some learning curves here or there, but I think it's a good thing to have that student voice at the table as we continue to, particularly with the changes in the graduation standards that are coming, the portrait of a graduate. It's a very exciting time to bring that voice to the table, I believe. So, Dr. Dean, anything you want to add, or Dr. Harney or Dr. Manning before we close out for the morning?
Just on behalf of the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association and our colleagues in Nassau County, the Nassau Council for School Superintendents, we look forward to working with you as the Ex-Officio student board members. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll be working with you soon.
Okay, folks, have a great morning and get back to class. Have a great day, folks. Thank you very much for attending.